Guys, it's Brianna Page and you're back with another video. Today guys, we're going back in time, and since we're going back in time, we're going to have like a low light density. So, we're going back in time. Okay, what is that? So, we're going back in time to the early 20th century and of the 1920s and 30s. This was a time of evolution, change, and most importantly, growth. This was known as one of the greatest, hardest times for Black people, and at the same time extraordinary. Can I get a round of applause? The Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was a time of evolution when it came to art, music, literature, acting, any type of stage performance. This was a time for change. See, before the Harlem Renaissance, Black people were seen as less of a human, less of the white community in America. They were not treated right even though they were freed. It was still a lot of segregation going on. But this was a time where change was happening when it came to showing Black people show that they should be invited to the table and they deserved it because they had talent and they had praise and that they had as much guts as what did. The greatest time periods, evolutionary wise, I'm very enthralled by this time period because it's just like basically like obsessed, because I don't know, something about this time period just seems so hard but at the same time so beautiful at the same time. Instead of talking about all of it, which I would love to, but we're going to be mainly focusing on the writers, the Harlem Writers, the authors, the essayists, the poets, the plays. We're going to be focused on that. We're going to be focused on the journalists, all these wonderful writers that different type of fields of writing and took their struggle and spoke their truth. This was one of the first times that Black people were actually, as a community, speaking what their truth and how they felt in America and that they should be treated equally. The first person we're going to be talking about, he's mostly known for his poets, but he is a novelist, and his name is Langston Hughes. You've probably heard of Langston Hughes in school, home, anywhere, because he's one of the greatest poets, but he also did novels also. And he's just like extraordinary, and you can't talk about the Harlem Renaissance without talking about the great Langston Hughes, you know what I'm saying? If you watch A Different World, you've heard of Langston Hughes' name about a dozen times. Langston Hughes' name was basically like his stage name, but for like when it comes to his books and poetry, but his real name was James Mercer Langston Hughes. He was born February 1st, 1902. He wasn't born in Harlem, even though he's part of the Harlem Writers. We're going to get farther into that. He was born in Joplin, Missouri. I know, right? Crazy. He moved to Lincoln, Illinois with his mother, and that's when he really started to focus on poetry and fell in love with the words of poetry. And after he graduated high school, he moved to Washington, D.C. Hughes wrote his first book of poetry in Washington, and it was called The Weary Blues. This piece was so beautiful because it talked about despair of the character and the person was going through at the time, and to repair the emotions, they were using music, jazz, to reinvent themselves and get through this hard time of resilience. Langston liked to put his poetry to music mainly and relate it back to music and how music takes away pain and anxiety. Same thing with like poetry, and put them together, and that's why his writings and his poets are so beautiful. Did you know this? He wrote poetry dedicated to W.E.B. Du Bois. I bet you didn't know that. School would teach you that, I know that, but just know you learned it right now.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you.
It was called The Negro Speaks of Rivers. Such a deep name, you know? See, in this poem that was dedicated to W.E.B. Du Bois, the depth and strength of a Black man dealing with what they had going on in America, and at the same time trying to make a change. Langston Hughes had a real obsession, if you think about it, with jazz music.
First of all, first. Yeah.
Same time, the magic, the passion about it was he took what he loved and what he loved to do, put it together and made the story of an urban black person living in America. Langston Hughes really opened people's minds on how they viewed black people, and he also wrote his truth. He used that pain to put into his writing of what he loved and what he loved to hear, put it together and made it to music to a person's ears to know the story of how it felt to be him and to be black. And it wasn't out of hate and despair, it was out of hatred. It was more out of, this is my pain, I want you to see how I feel. Amazing work, amazing work. Can I get a round of applause? Okay, let's move on to the next person. The next person we're going to be talking about is one of my favorite authors. She's literally my phone screensaver. But this is the great Zora Neale Hurston. Can I get a round of applause? Snaps, something? Zora Neale Hurston, she was a very outspoken person, just like everybody else in the Harlem Renaissance. But she was very, just like herself. You saw her, when you read her writing, you saw her reflect on the character, and that was one of the most beautiful things about her writing. See, she wasn't just a writer though, she was all in one. This woman was amazing. She showed, this is a time, guys, this is a time where women were looked down upon and being black was being looked down upon.
Okay? Not you, okay? Me, okay? You gonna respect me, okay?
So she was fighting a two-way battle, you know what I'm saying? So for her to voice her opinion at a time where she's being judged for two things is amazing. She's an anthropologist, a filmmaker, a writer. She wrote essays. She was just doing it all. She was not afraid to dip and dab and put her finger into new things. Her first book was actually called Jonah's Gourd Vine, but she wrote this book back in 1934, guys. That was a long time ago. The fact that it's almost 2020, it's almost 100 years ago. I mean, it won't be 100 years till another 14, 15 years, but it's literally almost 100 years ago. So this is so crazy that her work still touches people today.
All right.
And let's talk about her famous essay that I love so much deep to my heart, that I love reading over and over again. It's called How It Feels to Be Colored. Decades later, you still have that reflection of how it still feels to be, how it feels to be colored, especially in America.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping up.
There's still some discrimination going on. It's much better than what it was back in the 20s and 30s, but there's still some problems going on that need to be fixed. The reason why I relate so much, other people relate, is because Hurston, she wasn't born colored, you know what I'm saying? See, colored, black, white, all of this is depiction that was made by mankind. A baby is not taught this when they're young. They don't know about these things, how is it black, white, Indian, all that. It's good to have cultures, but we're separated. Mankind separated itself. You learn that as you get older in the world, that you are separated by your ethnicity, nationality, gender, sexuality. You're separated and put into different boxes based on these things about you, which is in religion, you're put in these boxes. Once you start expressing who you are and what you do, you learn as you get older that you're put in these boxes, which is not good, because as a whole, we should just be instead of having these different things going on and judging people based off what they believe on or what they do or what color their skin is, we should be one humankind, one human species. She talks about how she's just one human species, but human destroyed that depiction and made it into separation and made different ethnicity, and the fact that even that now that she was known to be colored, being colored, she learned that being colored was not a good thing, that it was actually a bad thing, and you were looked down upon. This is one of the greatest books written during the Harlem Renaissance, one of the most known books. If you look it up, you know, books known in the Harlem Renaissance, this will be one of the first ones to pop up. This is The Eyes Were Watching God. And it recently has been the 75th anniversary this year. You know, this many years later, and the book is still thriving. It's about this girl named Janie, and she goes through different parts of her life, of her love life, and it's like really good, guys. Especially when you get to the end. I don't want to spoil it. The story is like her love life is like reversed. So like what she wished she had when she was young, she got when she was older. And it's just a beautiful love story. It talks about love, death, the things a woman feels and goes through in her lifetime will follow with the story. Let's get a round of applause to Zora for her great work. Get on to the next person. The next greatest writer of this time, of course, Jessie Redmond Fawcett. She was born 1882. Another woman who did not limit herself and really pulled through with her passion and did what she loved and talked her truth, because she was an educator, she was a writer, she was an essayist, she was a mentor, journalist. She showed you even through hard times should not stop you from doing what you love. From 1919 to 1926, she was the editor for the NAACP magazine. Always told Black writers that if they're going to write, you should write the truth. And if you don't write the truth, you might as well not, you know what I'm saying? Not write.
So true.
And that's just like beautiful, you know? She's like, basically, she's like,
girl, boy, you gonna pick up a pencil or a pen and write? Especially during this time, you need to tell the truth. You need to tell them how you feel. You need them, let them know what's right and what's not right.
And then the person be like,
I don't know, I want to be a writer, but I don't know if I should tell the truth. It might upset people.
If you worry about upsetting people, then I don't think you should be a writer. I don't think you have the guts to be a writer, because you're not speaking the truth. What's the point of picking up a pen and pencil and writing something if you're not gonna speak the truth?
and she just put it like that. She was a real person. She wrote Plum Bum, There's Confusion. She wrote also Comedy in America Style and The China Berry Tree. So she was all over the place in a good way. She was doing it all. And I give her another round of applause for that. Like, understand when I say mentor and how good she was a person. Like, she mentored some of the greatest Harlem Renaissance writers that we speak of to this day. She mentored not just one, but multiple people. She helped Jean Toomer, the great Langston Hughes, Harlem McKay. She's kept speaking her truth even though she was getting a whole bunch of hate and a whole bunch of lashback from people. She still spoke her truth and still taught people to speak their truth. And she was not afraid to say something. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Let's talk about the great Jean Toomer. He was born in 1894 in Washington, D.C. He's a poet, essayist, and a novelist. Extraordinary person. Jean Toomer is not fully black. I don't think anybody's fully one race, but he had a lot of mixed ancestry. I don't think it's proven that he was, I don't know if he was like all the way black, half black or a little bit black, but I just know that he had some different racial depiction that claimed that he wasn't fully white, but he had a lot of white ancestry, but he did have another heritage that he speaks into, which I mostly believe I believe that he was black and white. Like, he depicted himself as both races when you read his work. When you read his essays and stuff, you would see that he is mixed, the way he explained himself, and that he most talked about was portrayal of like African Americans and their culture, and when it came to work labor. Guys, he was actually in the great state of Georgia, where I live. He was in Sparta, Georgia. He moved there in 1922. That was a long time ago, guys. That was almost 100 years ago for a fact, because in 3 years it would be, 3 years it will be 2022, so that would be exactly 100 years ago. So kudos for your work reaching this far. Also an educator. Can you believe that? Man, black people just ruled during that time. Basically, they really didn't give no.
I need a moment.
But basically, they were like, these were revolutionaries. God, these people were living their truth. He wrote Cocaine. It was like a a 3-part like novel thing going on there. The first part, it was like devoted to like black workers in the South, especially farmers. Especially like the South was a hard time. The second one is about the northern life. So he didn't just talk about the southern life, he talked about the northern life too. And it was basically like a letter to his brother. The third one that was named Cavaniss. Yes, Cavaniss, that is for sure. Hopefully that is right. He was talking basically about when it came to writing or speaking or doing any of the things like acting, literature, whatever you did, poetry, acting, music, whatever you did, play instrument, your black heart or your blackness and was a part of your story, because that was a part of your struggle, and you can never depict away from that. You can never take that away, because that was what all the pressure was coming from. The reason why this whole like these 2 decades were so like important and so revolutionary, because everybody told their stories differently but in different creative ways, but it all like came back of rooting from being black. And that's what he talked about, his struggles as being Afro-American and dealing with that, and telling a story, how each story had to involve him dealing with that struggle. Lastly, but surely not least, the great Claude McKay was a writer, a revolutionary, all in all, if you name it, he got it. He was actually born, guys, not in the United States. He was born in Sunnyvale, Jamaica. Alright guys, can I get a shout out to all my Caribbean people or Caribbean heritage guys? Yes, my dad is from the island. More than half of my family on my dad's side. Basically, all of them are from the island. I'm basically, me and my sister, my brother are basically, first generation born in the United States. See, Sunnyvale in Jamaica at the time was predominantly like black. White people during that time, whatever they were seen as inferior, top, best during that time. Other people considered the black community during that time, in Kingston especially, that they were less inferior and were not capable of anything basically, but he proved them wrong. Like he has right and like he should, period. Like all of that mess in in Jamaica that was going on during that time was nonsensical. He moved to like Brownstown in Kingston, and he continued to write his poetry, inspired by his daily routines in life during that time. And he was not just dealing with being black, he was dealing with being black and poor. So his first poem that he wrote, was called Songs of Jamaica, and it depicted basically like of living as a black person, especially like as peasant life in Jamaica, and dealing with the both wrongs and dealing with the hardship of life at such a young age. And back to Dr. Dre's quote, lyric, you can't help the cards that you will play, but you can either use your tools and your cards and manifest from that, or you can either fall and live in pain and let your like what you're born into define who you are, instead of using what you got into something beautiful. And then another one he had wrote was called Gustav's Ballads, if I'm not mistaken. Also wrote a lot of other poems and essays, and another one he wrote, If We Must Die. This man was really real. He didn't really believe in hiding his truth. His wordplay was really like raw truth. When he moved to Harlem, he talked about the Harlem Shadows, which is like the people, the prostitutes who had to go through certain lives just to like live and be able to benefit for themselves and survive. Full truth on how it felt to be, how they felt. You can tell that he was a very observant person and very honest, which manifests into his passion of writing. You can really see that type of personality inside his writing. They all changed the game for black people, and how they were stepping stones of changing the game of how black people were seen in this world. They really put their passion with their pain, and made it beautiful and extraordinary. Peace, love, and See you next time.
Rather act like a bird. Play what they want, ain't what they want. Only been homies for just a few months. Time to build trust, especially when people you thought you was friends with just start moving sus. I don't hold a grudge. Stop messing with them like they're non-existent because they're a dog. While you sending threats when you ain't a thug, so you in the club and you ain't do nothing.